All right, so we're going to talk today about anxiety. Heavy topic, so we're going to do our best to keep it light and easy and really talk about how we view anxiety from both through a lens of both behavior and emotional, as well as some other ways that we look at it. And so, Brian, I'll let you kind of discuss with our families how we approach anxiety.
Yeah, so I am pleased as punch we get to talk about a topic that is the most common diagnosis. So if you're going to have a diagnosis in the psychiatric mental health world, the most common is anxiety. So first off, take a deep breath because
I did. I was like,
yeah, because it's super common.
Yeah.
So you are not alone. One of the most important aspects in the way that I conceptualize treating anxiety is kind of three different buckets from the psychiatric perspective. So your biological, your psychological, and your social. The great thing about Kids Brain Tree is we actually expand on those three buckets so that we get more breadth and depth of how to help you. But I'm just going to give you some highlights today, if that works for you.
Great. It's perfect.
Awesome. So biologically, kind of the physiology, biology of anxiety, we think it's related to serotonin. And so the key to effective medication management. So in the event that you need to use a medicine, all our medicines do, especially in the pediatric populations, is our medicines push around serotonin. So if you're not making enough serotonin, or you're doing something that keeps serotonin from being available, that's going to be a problem. So first and foremost, serotonin is derived from amino acids, which is a fancy term for proteins. So you need to make sure that your kiddos are getting enough protein, enough quality protein, right? And so that's from fish. Watch how much red meat you're eating. Be very, very thoughtful of the vegetables. Almonds are great. Just be very, very thoughtful about the food that you're feeding the kiddos. So that's one of the first things. The next thing is sleep. Kids really, really need to sleep because if you're not sleeping, kids get very anxious and kind of unruly, right?
Yeah.
And so those are kind of two of the biggest highlights of the kind of biological aspect of anxiety. Of course, watch all the other stuff. Look out for caffeine and stuff like that. Sugar in and of itself is not a bad thing. So it shouldn't really do anything to your anxiety. But if you're going to be eating carbohydrates, make sure you get the complex carbohydrates, if at all possible, instead of the simple stuff. So that's kind of the biological aspect. I'll run through the other two, and then I open it up for any questions that you have for me, Leanna.
Good. I have some.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
Exactly. So that's the biological aspect. The psychological aspect. So anxiety is a trick that your brain is playing on itself. It's making yourself think that you're in danger or that you need to react to something. And that can be caused from lots of different ways. So sometimes being bullied or picked on can cause anxiety or look that way. Going through any type of trauma. Sometimes it's just the environment that you are in, whether it's school stress, especially if you're in a rigorous educational program that's expecting a lot of you. If you're online a lot. So if you are doing a lot of computer activities, that can also stress you out. And so some of the psychological cues that you can use is when you feel your heart race, then go and do a certain thing. So if your kiddo's getting worked up, if you're feeling worked up, you can have a set amount of tools. And this is kind of a behavioral approach, which KBT is really, really great at, of jumping in front and saying, okay, my heart is racing. This is what I do next. And you keep that system intact. You do that every single time. So that can be very helpful. So for example, one of the more basic approaches is I'm feeling worked up. You do your finger candles where you take a deep breath and you blow. Take a deep breath and you blow. That's one approach. But the good thing about KBT is y'all are the experts and y'all have a slew of things that kids can use.
Yes, we do. And stuff we create with the families. But I like that because what you talked about was so important is that it's that we have to get in front of it. And we have to, as parents or whatever, however you're involved in their support community, we have to be aware of what the cues and the triggers are and then know when to come into support.
Absolutely. And it's so funny. And one of the things I train my parents in is when you recognize that kids are egocentric, which is a fancy psychological term for they put themselves in the middle of the universe and everything revolves around them. An egocentric, anxious child will try to fix everything else around them. And so the first step that most parents can make to help their child calm down is to kind of monitor yourself, self-regulate yourself. And you talk about this a lot in a lot of your lectures on anxiety and parental dynamics. And it is absolutely true that when parents feel more in control of themselves, and then they're being mindful that their anxious child is somewhere around them, then that actually brings their anxiety down. So a really concrete example, a really specific example, I teach all of my parents not to process out loud, which is when parents wake up for the day and they go, all right, okay, Bobby, we're going to get you to school after school. I'm going to drop you off over here. And then we're going to go to Aunt Susie's house. And then I'm going to run to the store. And then we're going to have this. Well,
and here it goes.
Here we go. It comes. And so, and that gets your kiddo really, really worked up. And so instead you wake up and you just tell your kiddo, especially if they have anxiety, you say, you know what, Bobby, we're going to have a great day. And that is a behavioral thing. So Bobby's first response is going to go, but Mom, what are we going to do? You didn't tell me, right? Well, then your next response is, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And then you just kind of move on. And it's going to take a couple days for Bobby to get used to this new version of a you, but it works extremely well, y'all. I kid you not. And it brings their anxiety level down a bit.
That hands down. I mean, that's been one thing that as you have worked with your clients and our parents, and for myself personally, it's that concept of move on.
Yeah.
And so we've used that concept of move on, not only in terms of anxiety, and this is a different talk, but in terms of even when we're helping a child regulate. Absolutely. And that concept of keep the pace and move on, but you're moving on not in a hurried, rushed way, but a mindful, I got this kind of way, which really supports our concepts of that as you as the parent or the caretaker will always be bigger, stronger, wiser, kinder.
Absolutely.
And there's a tone to that.
Yeah. And then that directly ties into that last area, which is the kind of social aspect. So if your child or you are anxious, and you surround yourself with anxious people, especially anxious people online, anxious people at school, anxious people at work, you're going to be more anxious. And so it's super, super helpful to kind of find your clique, find your clan of other thoughtful, mindful people. And that's why I love what KBT is doing, which is building a network of individuals that are very, very thoughtful. And that goes for kids as well, is over time developing a kind of a network of folks who kids can hang around that are very mindful, thoughtful, don't stress out about things because you tend to do what your peers do.
So that is a powerful concept because we are modeling like the people we surround ourselves, our children are they're watching, right? And that mindful concept, purposeful, mindful, and intentional.
Absolutely.
And that's the key. So it's the concept of anxiety can feel very formless and very obtuse, but when you break it down into those buckets and you know where to place it, you'll also know then how to create, and we help with this. And the innate wisdom of our families, once they get into this mindful place and state, they begin to understand how they can navigate the nervous system of their child, the nervous system of the siblings, and then the nervous system of the families, their whole family unit.
Absolutely. And I love that concept of kind of the family, it's kind of the family tree. So kids' brain tree, family tree connection, and that family, bringing the whole family nervous system down a couple notches. And at the end of the day, just go play. Go outside, throw a football, kick the soccer ball, do what you got to do.
So I would say there's always those little tools that you keep that, like, when all else fails, pull this button or push this button or pull this one. And that's going to be the play button.
Yes.
When you can't think of what to do, go play.
Go play.
Go outside, run, cross that midline as you're running, and their visual field begins to open up, and you're around nature, and you throw the ball, and you get your sensory motor system going. That will do that bottom up regulation, especially when they're dealing with anxiety, anxiousness.
Love it.
Perfect. Well, so we'll continue these talks because I think what is so powerful about that is that what I also see with anxiety is that it is interweaved into a lot of other diagnoses.
Absolutely.
ADHD, right? Autism, ODD.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is a component of anxiety, and it's interesting because I feel like that as we do this job of educating and equipping families with tools and knowledge, that they'll begin to understand the intentionality and how we approach. We're not approaching it as a label, but that we are really individualizing this to the family need and to that child's systems need. Mm-hmm. But that I do believe that in how you've educated me is that, with that diagnosis, anxiety can look and be treated differently in each case.
Absolutely.
And there's no one size fits all. There's not going to be one vitamin that you take and that right? Exactly. And so this is where having that intentional conversation and education piece is going to be so powerful. So
I completely agree with you. And I'm glad that I can be part of an amazing team, because it truly takes a team to do anything. So thank you for this opportunity.
It's amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much.